Imagine Spain in the 1930s, a country rich in culture and history, but facing severe internal strife. The nation was in deep trouble, grappling with widespread poverty, economic hardship, and social unrest. In 1936, a terrible war broke out, splitting the nation in two. This conflict would come to be known as the Spanish Civil War. The war saw brutal battles and intense fighting, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. On one side were the nationalists, led by General Franco. They sought to establish a strong, centralized government with one leader in charge. The nationalists used propaganda and rallies to gain support, promising stability and order. On the other side were the Republicans, a coalition of left-leaning groups. They were fighting to protect the democratic government that the people had voted for, advocating for social reforms and workers' rights. The war dragged on for 3 long years, with neither side able to secure a decisive victory for much of the conflict. Finally, in 1939, the nationalists emerged victorious, marking the end of the war. The Spanish Civil War was a complicated and painful conflict, leaving behind a trail of destruction and countless refugees. It was caused by a mix of political disagreements, social unrest, and economic hardship, creating a perfect storm for conflict. The war left deep wounds in Spanish society, wounds that would take a very long time to heal. Families were torn apart and the nation was left to rebuild from the ashes. Other countries got involved too, making it a fight between different beliefs on a global scale. The Spanish Civil War became a precursor to the larger ideological battles that would soon engulf the world in World War II. Like and subscribe to MGO TV 360 History for more stories. Both the nationalists and the Republicans needed soldiers to fight their war. The conflict was intense and both sides were desperate for manpower, so they forced ordinary citizens to join the military. This is called conscription. It meant that men from all walks of life were suddenly turned into soldiers. Men who were old enough to fight, usually between 18 and 40, were ordered to become soldiers. This age range meant that many young men had to leave their families behind. Many had no choice but to go, even if they didn't agree with the war. The fear and uncertainty were palpable among these new recruits. Life as a soldier was very difficult. The conditions were harsh, and the reality of war was far from the romanticized notion of heroism. They often didn't have enough food, proper uniforms, or medicine if they were hurt. The lack of resources made survival a daily struggle. Many soldiers were farmers or factory workers who had never held a gun before. They were ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. They were thrown into the horrors of war with very little training. The lack of preparation often led to devastating consequences on the battlefield. The Spanish Civil War had a terrible effect on Spain and its people. Families were ripped apart as sons, husbands, and fathers were sent off to fight. The war ruined the economy, making food and other important things hard to find. Ordinary people caught in the middle of the fighting suffered terribly. The war was also incredibly hard on the soldiers. Many were killed or wounded in battle. Those who survived often carried the physical and emotional pain of what they had seen for the rest of their lives. The war left an entire generation deeply affected by violence and loss. The Spanish Civil War became a fight between other countries too. It wasn't just a conflict confined to Spain's borders. It drew in the attention and involvement of many powerful nations around the world. Germany and Italy, both ruled by dictators, supported Franco's nationalists. They provided significant military aid, including aircraft, tanks, and troops, which bolstered Franco's forces and gave them a crucial advantage. The Soviet Union, a communist country, helped the Republicans. They sent weapons, advisors, and even soldiers to support the anti-fascist cause, hoping to spread their ideology and counter the influence of the fascist powers. Many people from other countries, believing they were fighting for a good cause, traveled to Spain to fight with the Republicans in what were called the International Brigades. These volunteers came from all walks of life, united by their desire to combat fascism and defend democracy. The involvement of other countries had a big impact on the war. It wasn't just about the Spanish factions anymore, it became a proxy war for larger ideological battles between fascism, communism and democracy. It gave both sides weapons and support. This influx of international aid meant that the conflict was more intense and prolonged than it might have been otherwise. However, it also made the war last longer and become even more violent. The stakes were higher and the battles fiercer, as each side received continuous support from their international allies. The Spanish Civil War became a testing ground for new military weapons and strategies that would later be used in World War II. This conflict served as a grim rehearsal for the global war that was soon to come, with devastating consequences. In 1939, Franco's nationalists won the war. This victory led to a period of strict rule by Franco that would last for many decades. The war had a deep and lasting impact on Spain. It left the country deeply divided, its economy in ruins, and its people traumatized by the violence they had experienced. The Spanish Civil War reminds us of the terrible cost of war. It shows us how important it is to understand each other, be tolerant, and find peaceful solutions. The memories of this devastating war continue to shape Spain and serve as a warning to the entire world. Don't forget to like and subscribe to MGO TV 360 History for more stories.